Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Georgian President Salome Zourabichvili is set to address the European Parliament in the wake of the protests in her country. She is expected to reiterate her commitment to bringing Georgia back on the European path in the wake of the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party winning the majority in parliament after allegedly rigged elections. Zourabichvili has been a staunch ally of pro-EU activists. She has joined protests against the Georgian Dream Party, who recently hand-picked former football player Mikhail Kavelashvili to succeed her later this month. Zourabichvili has said she refuses to step down until free and fair elections are held. The European Parliament last month rejected the election results in a resolution which called the vote effectively stolen. And Salome Zourabichvili will later join TVP World Strasbourg correspondent Sascha Fahrbach for an exclusive interview, so please stay tuned. And now moving on, Tuesday was day 19 of peaceful protests in Georgia. Our correspondent Don Arleth has the latest from Tbilisi.
Another night of protests here in the capital of Georgia continue. This time, historians taking to the streets and marching throughout Tbilisi and gathering here in front of the parliament building. Now, the president of Georgia, President Zourabichvili, her term ended yesterday. She is now headed to Strasbourg, where she will address the European Parliament tomorrow. So what's on the agenda? Well, sanctions. Only two countries in the European Union, that's Estonia and Lithuania, have so far introduced sanctions on members of the Georgian Dream Party, key players. Now, the European Union is going to make an attempt to do the same thing and place sanctions on diplomatic passport holders of the Georgian government in order to put pressure on them. And of course, they want to consult with the president of Georgia to find out exactly what other mechanisms can be used in order to pressure the government and hold those accountable who've been cracking down violently on these protesters here in Georgia. Now, also, another threat, although there are not water cannons and riot police out on the streets here in Tbilisi, and the protests have died down quite a bit, one continuous threat that remains is titushki. These are hired thugs that are usually masked and dressed in black. They've been targeting individual activists and protesters, and of course, basically beating them up. So there are still reports of this happening in several locations throughout the city. And of course, this seems to be a brutal method to make it less attractive for the protesters to show up here in front of the parliament building. Reporting from Tbilisi, Don Arleth, TVP World.
European leaders will head to Brussels on Thursday to discuss a range of geopolitical issues. But one topic seems to be especially important for Poland, and that is migration. The meeting comes as Warsaw rejected the European Commission's request to present a national plan for managing migration flows. Media reports suggest that Poland intends to concentrate on fortifying its border with Belarus instead. Angela Skudjans has more.
European leaders will flock to Brussels on Thursday for a European Council meeting with a range of items on the itinerary. Now, migration sits in that stacked agenda and presents a bit of a thorny issue, particularly for Poland. Last week, Warsaw was meant to present its national implementation plan under the Migration Pact. This pact was agreed to by a range of European Union member states and is meant to govern different member states and how they assess and manage migration flows. Warsaw was among almost half of EU member states that did not present their plans. Media reports also suggest that officials had no intention of submitting these plans and instead wanted to refocus their energy on beefing up their eastern flank rather than that policy document. Now, it's interesting because EU members will have to come to some kind of consensus on migration. And while EU member states shift more to the right with more conservative governments, it'll be interesting to see what proposal they will take and what policy route they will take on Thursday in Brussels. My name is Angela Skujins, reporting from the Belgian capital for TVP World.
The European Union is upping its game to convince the Balkan nations to continue on their path towards joining the bloc. EU leaders will be discussing their investment plans for the Balkans today at the Western Balkans Summit in Brussels.
On the outside, EU institutions look as calm as ever. But inside, the hallways are buzzing with anticipation ahead of an intense few days. Leaders from all 27 member states will gather for the European Council on Thursday, which will be preceded by the Western Balkans Summit the day before. According to a senior EU official who asked to remain anonymous, funding will be one of the main topics of discussions.
Grants and loans, investments, intensity of aid. It's going to be a clear bet in the integration process on the part of the EU.
The European Union has been flirting with Western Balkan countries for years, encouraging them to join the bloc. Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Serbia all have official EU candidate status. Kosovo is also considered a potential candidate, but its independence from Serbia hasn't yet been recognized by 5 of the bloc's member states. While these countries are mostly eager to join the EU, there is another player looking for influence in the region: Russia. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić is one of the most openly pro-Russian leaders in the Balkans. Convincing him to introduce pro-European reforms will be one of the toughest challenges for the EU. That's one of the reasons Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk took his time to visit Belgrade in October.
During the Polish presidency, EU enlargement and the closest possible cooperation with Serbia will be my priority.
The Serbian government has also been accused by Amnesty International of abusing spyware systems to surveil journalists and activists. The discussions in Brussels on Wednesday are going to be tricky, to say the least.
The European Parliament held its annual awards ceremony for the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought on Tuesday. This year's winners, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado and President-elect Edmundo González Urita, were recognized for their exceptional efforts to reinstate freedom and democracy in Venezuela. Sascha Fahrbach has this report.
The fight for freedom is never in vain. Those are the words of Roberta Metsola, the head of the European Parliament. Now, in today's session, the Sakharov Prize, also known as the Prize for Freedom of Thought, was awarded to Venezuelan opposition leaders, Mrs. Machado and the President-elect Urrutia. Now, it's worth noting that back in September of this year, there was a resolution passed here in the European Parliament that very much recognized Urrutia as the president after those elections in Venezuela. Now, Mr. Maduro has not recognized that. Both of these have been crackdowns against opposition in Venezuela. So it sends a powerful signal, but it's also one that's been noticed not just for Europe, but also other regions. Notably, one of the actual finalists could not make it here from Azerbaijan, and his daughter was here and expressed also what this means, not just for Venezuela, but tyrants around the world.
My dad, Dr. Gubadi Badolo, needs urgent heart surgery. He was also supposed to be at Dresden University of Technology teaching German students. However, now he's in house arrest and has no access to health care, and we are trying to get him urgent heart surgery. So I hope that Sakharov Prize can help him and can actually save my dad's life. Expect Europe to treat basically Azerbaijan as the same as Russia, because Azerbaijan is also scoring very low on human rights and democracy, but also has been pumping the Russian oil and gas to Europe according to my dad's research. And we shouldn't let Russia to get stronger and be a threat for Europe and our security. But also that means that Europe should be much more stricter with Azerbaijan, so that Azerbaijan does not sell Russian oil and gas.
And in a world that it's like the one we have now, where in many regions democracy is under attack, I think that the Sakharov Prize is a sort of symbol of hope and solidarity. We are proud to have been able to honor Cristina Machado and President-elect Urrutia, fighting for freedom and liberty and democracy for all Venezuelan people.
Now, ultimately, this prize goes back to 1988, and ever since then, this has been the highest honor of the European Union for human rights. Nelson Mandela, one of the laureates in the past, and MEPs here select those who should be nominated and who are voted on, and it does send a very strong signal that this parliament here values human rights and resilience of democracy around the world. That's Sascha Fahrbach for TVP World in Strasbourg.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is seeking to shore up Western support for Ukraine ahead of Volodymyr Zelensky's talks with European leaders in Brussels tomorrow. Tusk, who made an unannounced visit to the city of Lviv, met with the Ukrainian president to discuss how to strengthen Kyiv's position ahead of possible ceasefire negotiations.
The visit of the Polish Prime Minister to Lviv in Ukraine was long shrouded in secrecy, and its main purpose, rallying up Western support for a just peace in Kyiv.
Stop speculating in any capital of the world about Ukraine's possible defeat. This has nothing to do with facts.
Donald Tusk underscored that it is important that Ukraine be as strong as possible at the negotiating table. He reiterated Poland's support for Ukraine's NATO accession.
If it was up to Poland, it wouldn't take more than one day.
And said that the incoming Polish presidency in the EU Council means intensifying EU accession talks for Kyiv. These words of support from the Polish Prime Minister come just before Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Brussels. There, the Ukrainian president intends to seek support from the EU ahead of the expected ceasefire talks. The talks in which Russia, Zelensky says, cannot be trusted.
But there's no escape from it. We live next to them and we share a long border. That is why Ukraine needs to emerge from this war as a very strong country.
Earlier this week, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, said that no schemes involving a freeze of the conflict will suit Russia. On Wednesday, Zelensky will visit Brussels to meet with EU and NATO leaders. The meeting comes as Europe awaits Donald Trump's return to the White House in January and a possible shift in US policy toward the conflict in Ukraine.
Analysts say the high-profile assassination of Russian Lieutenant General Kirillov demonstrates Kyiv's ability to kill key military figures at the heart of the Kremlin's war machine. The assassination took place just 24 hours after he was charged in absentia by Ukrainian authorities for the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine.
This video claims to show the moment a daring intelligence operation takes out one of Ukraine's highest-profile targets, using a bomb hidden in an electric scooter. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov led Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical forces. Ukraine's SBU intelligence service accused him of using chemical weapons against Kyiv's forces. His killing will unnerve Russia's military and political elite.
If that will be confirmed that it was Ukrainian, that Ukrainian did that, it means that any official cannot feel secure in the situation, even if they are in Russia territory.
Moscow has launched an investigation into the blast, which also claimed Kirillov's aid. The US, Britain and Canada sanctioned Kirillov for using riot control agents, and multiple reports of the toxic choking agent chloropicrin being used on the battlefield. Analysts say the assassination was likely carried out with local support sympathetic to Kyiv's cause.
It shouldn't be surprising that Ukrainian intelligence is able to find people who are willing to fight for Ukraine and to risk their lives in what is Ukraine's existential struggle for survival.
Neighbors say Kirillov had no security.
At the moment you see a lot of police, but usually everything is open. Anybody can go in and out, drive in and out.
Kirillov is the latest in a series of targeted assassinations. In November, a senior Russian naval officer, Valery Trankovsky, was killed in a car bomb. Ukraine said he had ordered missile strikes on civilian targets. Pro-war blogger Vladlen Tarsky was killed in a cafe bombing in St. Petersburg in March last year. And in August 2022, Daria Dugina, the daughter of far-right Russian political philosopher Alexander Dugin. Experts say the attack is embarrassing for President Putin.
This is damaging Russia's reputation. They cannot be sure, and they cannot 100% protect their very high flag officers. Yes, they can be killed even in Moscow. So this is very worrying, and of course, it's a kind of very worrying message to other important people in Moscow.
The former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who now serves as deputy chairman of the country's Security Council, vowed imminent revenge for Kirillov's assassination.
And we now have breaking news on this story. Russia's security service says a 29-year-old Uzbekistan citizen has been detained over the killing of Senior General Igor Kirillov and his assistant in Moscow. And with this, we conclude this news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.